As events continue to evolve to wherever they're evolving to, one thing will remain static, and that is that content is still king. The content, although weirdly oftentimes neglected, will always need to be created, prepared, edited, re-edited, shepherded, curated, rehearsed, and eventually executed. In an event, there may be many, many people who touch content. And by content, I mean assets, things like slides, video, audio, and scripts. Not a lot of folks know how to successfully manage or organize this beast, or how to help to get it to a place where it can be executed by the technical crew, and where it can successfully become part of the experience. Enter Michelle Newbon. Michelle is a content manager. Now, up until a few years ago, most events producers didn't even know that they needed a content manager. But take it from me, every show needs one. I'm fond of saying it doesn't matter how small your event is, it's never too small to be organized. And content requires an organizer on the production side. So, I wanted to talk with Michelle not only because she's a content manager and I think that they're invaluable, and as a show caller, I want to trumpet their value from the highest mountain. But she also wrote a poem, which she published on LinkedIn, which I read. And I thought it was very, very clever and very, very topical as it relates to where many of the people within the events industry find themselves right now. So, Michelle agreed to come on the show. And not only to read the poem she published on LinkedIn, but to actually write and read a couple of other original poems here on the show. So we, here at Event Yak, have our first world debut event industry poetry reading. So freaking cool, right? So let's get to it and speak with Michelle Newbon.
Playback ending in 5.
Stand by fake
4,
music, stand by talent.
3, 2, 1. Clear.
Music go. Talent go. Welcome to Event Yak, where event pros share their stories about the past, present, and future. I'm your host, Terri Walters.
Musings from an unemployed live events producer. Production blues. Screeching to a halt with the sound of big thunder. We're all wondering, how do we not go under? At first they were saying maybe by summer. Consensus now is 18 months. Dang, what a bummer. This whole thing is seriously fucked. 6 feet apart on site. Yeah, right, and good luck. I go on LinkedIn because I know that I should, perusing it all until I don't feel good. There are all these things that I'm supposed to do, programs as acronyms to brighten the view. The PPP and the EIDL, the SBA, and oh, what the hell. I applied and submitted and am standing by, but have no idea if I should rejoice or just cry. I make a checklist at the start of each day to make me think that I'm well underway. But then I'm all done and it's 8:32, no emails to answer and nothing to do. There are webinars and Zoom calls with industry experts. I can learn all day long, but why does my brain hurt? I'll try not to think about it until this thing passes. I'll work on my hobbies, but I feel like molasses. Just get a hold of yourself. It's a brand new day. Drink your half cap. It'll all be okay. But why do I feel that I'm so undergunned? Because it's a global pandemic and this ain't no fun. It's been my way to end on a good note, but all I can say is that's all she wrote.
Michelle Newbon, thanks for reading your poem here on Event Yak, and thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's great.
I know that this poem is very personal, but it's also very universal. Tell me about why you wrote it.
I think just being in this situation and feeling pretty down, actually. Um, I was having kind of a down day, and I thought, let me just express myself in a way that makes me feel good, which is writing these little poems that I've kind of written my whole life. And mainly, I write them for my husband. I don't really put them, publish them a lot or really kind of ever. But I thought, let me just get into this. And writing for me really sort of lets me know what I'm feeling about things. And so I started to put it together. And when I finished it, I thought, or let me back up and say, I thought I would like to post this to LinkedIn. But when I wrote it, I thought, no, I better not, because it's kind of depressing. And I shared it with my husband. And the first thing he said was, you need to share this. So I did. And I felt a little nervous about it, what the reaction would be. Also saying that I don't post a lot to LinkedIn. Usually I have like something I post once a year at the start of the year about what I'm thankful for in this business. But anyway, that's kind of how the impetus for this was, just feeling the really the melancholy from it. And I had so many great shows lined up, and like all of us in this business, they all just collapsed like dominoes. And just where to go with all that energy and that excitement that was going to be put to all these great places and cities and shows, and then it just stopped. So it was another place to express myself and get it out there. And it felt really good to have people respond, and knowing that we're all kind of experiencing this same thing in this really, really unprecedented time.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, and I think it shows a real vulnerability, but I think that it's reflective of the industry as a whole.
Absolutely. I think that, we're all just reeling, and we've never experienced anything like this. And I feel like the industry also, everybody I know has been, nonstop working. I mean, we all got through '08, and then it feels like it's just kind of been going on a really high track since then. And I feel like everybody I know and all the people I'm working with are at the top of their games. And then just to have the kind of the floor fall out from underneath us is just, it's just, it elicits a whole bunch of different emotions. And where do you, again, going back to where do you put all that energy? And I think that's an interesting aspect to look at, because we're all highly driven people, used to this high level of production and performance and giving of ourselves, and then it's gone. And then we're all so busy and traveling, and then just holding this space of kind of, I guess, mutual grief, and what isn't there, and where do we put ourselves, and how do we go about our day. And so the stanza, then I'm all done and it's 8:32, no emails to answer and nothing to do, is like so poignant.
It's
because I
real.
just
It's
would be
real for
done.
like everybody. It's true.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, where do I put myself now? And
Yeah,
it's not that I don't have things that I like to do, and I'm
right.
doing them, but I'm not being activated or stimulated at the level that I am used to.
Yeah. I mean, we all have jobs where, you've got time off, and, as kind of freelancers or running our own businesses, it's, you're like slammed, and then, okay, now, you're down a little bit, and then you come back, but you know that it's going to come back,
Right.
and now I think we're all at a point where we kind of don't know what the deal is. Have you heard anything from any of your close industry friends about what they're doing? You're doing poetry, and I think that's very cool.
Yeah, it varies. I mean, some people, luckily for them, are working. They're working on virtual events, which is fantastic. Others, I think they're activating their creative endeavors with their work. Like, I have a friend who's a graphics designer, and she just posted a survey on LinkedIn asking for people to kind of respond to what they're looking for now. And so people are really trying to adapt to this current, wonkiness. But it's a mix. I'd say a lot of people professionally are trying to get creative, and then personally delving into those things that they enjoy in their lives. And for me, that's something I've always done, is getting in the outdoors and expressing myself athletically, and physically has always just been my thing. So there's been a lot of that for me, as well as the writing. So I'd say it's been a mix, and I've had a lot of really nice 1 hour, hour and a half phone calls with individuals, just really good friends in the business. And I have friends that are, one friend, she's in Missouri, and she's out kayaking every day. She's a well-known stage manager, and others just getting into reading and just their own personal interests. I think so. It's a mix. It's a mix, and we're all just, I think, kind of making it up as we go along from day to day. And what's so unusual is just looking out on the horizon to this big unknown. And it's, I've been thinking about it and writing about it in my non-poetry way, but is more journaling with the idea of getting comfortable with what's uncomfortable. And there's been a huge amount of opportunity for that every day, because every day I'm uncomfortable. I'm really uncomfortable with just, I have a couple of things on the books. Who knows if they'll stick for this year? Things are starting to pop up for next year, but who knows? So
I hear you. I hear you. It's I've heard a couple of different things from some of my friends too. Like you mentioned, people are just trying to. It's like they're doing personal resets, and some people, in the beginning were like, yeah, this is great. We have some opportunity to kind of take a breath because we're always so busy. And now it's like, okay, when are we getting back?
Right, because I think that we can all accept and would like a certain amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's for some people 2 weeks, maybe it's 3, maybe it's a month, maybe it's 2 months. But beyond a certain amount of time, there's like a digression that's happening.
Yeah.
It's we too much time is sort of it is not a positive thing anymore. And so you need to have direction and focus and have it be contained. And I think working on shows for me, and I won't speak for everybody, but I think we probably all feel this way. It gives us a container of focus and of really feeling good about what we're putting together and being a part of something bigger than ourselves and something that we couldn't do ourselves. And it requires all of us, and that coming together and that alchemy is really unique, and it just stokes the fire. And so when that isn't there, it's really hard to replace. And I would say I'm somebody that has a lot of other things I like to do,
Mm-hmm.
and it's still been hard. And I'm even, I would like to be working, but right now that isn't happening. And even when I think about virtual events, it is not the same thing. And so I think there's that just really wanting for it to get back to what it was, and also knowing it will never be exactly the way it was. And that's a hard thing to kind of grasp.
And I think that's kind of what you mentioned with mourning. I think a lot of people are feeling that same thing. I think in everybody's guts, they kind of know that it's never, you never say never, but it's not kind of going to be the same. It's going to be different somehow, some way.
Yeah.
But
I think so. Yeah.
But I think, we'll take it, one step at a time, and hopefully it will evolve, and the world will restart and wake again. That sounds optimistic, doesn't it? Jeez.
I think you're right, though. I do think you're right. It's just we're not used to this amount of time
that's going
to be required to get there.
Yeah.
And it's just this patience, like this. Mm-hmm. Really, this patience, it's difficult.
Yeah.
Just to kind of maintain that. It's easy to do for a day or a week, but this amount of time and when it's unknown is really challenging.
Yeah. I'm going to shift gears a little bit here, and you're going to read us another poem, but this one has not been published yet, right? Or has it?
None of the other ones have been published. So no, I wrote it. Just the one I read has been published.
Okay.
And what would you like me to read next?
I like the content one because I want to go in and talk a little bit about what you do for a living.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Okay. And I will go ahead and read this one called Content Ditty. The world of live events is its own kind of beast. A ubiquitous allure sucks you in, to say the least. Now add in the content and consequences rise. You think you got this thing? Success or just demise. No one wants to do it. Way too many details. At first it seems so easy, and then it's off the rails. With themes and creative, writers and graphics. Strategizing nightly, it's mental gymnastics. Too many files with all the wrong names, drowning in Word docs. They all look the same. What do we name it and where does it go? Email it or post it. No one seems to know. Put it on Dropbox. Someone made some folders. Stick it in the root. Look for one called older. Pre-pro's gaining steam as we lay down all the tracks. Gonna do this thing in Vegas and we won't be looking back. Check in and set up and see what's transpired. Is my inbox intact or is it on fire? Then there are rehearsals and all that entails. Go grab all the files. You don't want to fail. That's the wrong version. We wrote it last week. The tension's so strong, you're all up a creek. But prompter is on it and graphics is too. It's correct after all, the production team knew. The talent is late and catering's a mess. The PA's stuck in traffic, but now I digress. The CEO is here with a brand new script. She says no to full frame, only wants to pip. And oh, by the way, in the DSMs, current and next please, and some green M&Ms. My slides are in progress, 4:3 on white, with a few animations just to give it a bite. Oh, and one more thing, if I do recall, there might be 2 demos, or likely none at all. And so it goes, kindling to flames, heads are gonna roll and someone's taking names. But no matter what, we all do take our cue. The show, it turns out flawless, thanks to the entire crew.
I laughed out loud when you said, look for one called older. Oh, that's so funny. That is so relevant. It's so relevant. Oh my God. That's too funny. Well, thanks for doing the world premiere there. That is really funny. And it kind of encapsulates the content. I mean, the content producer. And so tell me, what does a content producer do?
Basically, it's managing all the aspects of content. And I look at it as you've got scripts and presentations and ancillary assets, video components, and that all needs to be managed. And it's different for every show. So that can mean, sometimes I can have a very long pre-production process where I'm involved in really setting up the infrastructure to capture the data, working with our content team, which means graphics designers, writers, working with the client, our internal team, and setting up a system that will take us down those tracks and that will make a smooth process. And as we get versions and sort of we're iterating forward, and there's a lot of documents coming through and files, and where do you put them and who do you get them to and what is the process. So part of it for me is setting up that infrastructure to create that place to capture everything and to kind of let everybody know what we're doing, and bringing that up and through on site, which turns into the 3-dimensional aspect of it as we get on stage and we're backstage, and it's getting things to prompter and video village and the graphics designers. And so that's kind of the overarching part of it. And every show has some or all of those aspects. And so sometimes, and I really started in content as a script supervisor. So I was working with, scripts and then with prompter, and then I moved into just sort of all aspects of it a few years in. And so it's a management process that, again, goes from the pre-pro all the way to on stage and through show day. And it's managing personalities. It's an area that's really sort of critical, but also people have their vulnerabilities. I mean, everybody who is speaking, whatever level of professional up to C-suite executive, has that. They're putting themselves out there. There's a vulnerability. There's that stress and tension that comes with it, which makes content that kind of, it's just flashpoint. That's why in the poem I say nobody wants to touch it, because it's nobody wants to. It's, people have asked me, why do you even, what's it? Why do you do this?
Right.
But I've been attracted to it because I like what's being written, what's being said, what's being communicated, and working with people sort of regarding that. How are they coming up with this? Not that I have the opportunity every time to delve into all of these things, but over the course of my career, I've got to touch on all of it, and I have thoroughly enjoyed it. But I would say, just in terms of what it does, you're really managing. My role is managing all that, and it's corralling the cats constantly, and it just has its unique challenges, as I think we all know, with version control and getting everything to the operators and making sure that we're all in sync. So I'm not sure if it describes it well enough, but that's sort of what I would say about it.
I think it does. I think, you're like a mega project manager, and the project is the conference itself. And
Right.
And the content, it's funny. And as a show producer, I cannot overemphasize the importance of a content producer. I mean, to me, it's like, it's one of the key roles. I love working with content producers. So.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it is something. And I remember back when I started doing it, I think I really got into it maybe 13 to maybe 15 years ago.
Mhm.
Prior to that, I was an AP and a coordinator and kind of working my way up. But there really weren't content producers.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't really have that.
Right.
And so it became the kind of thing where when I got first called in to do scripts, I'm like, okay, I like this. And there just weren't script supervisors or content producers, content managers. And it became evident I basically based my career on a line item that did not used to exist. But each time, and I won't just say me, but it did happen to me that I came into a show and did my job, then I alleviated 3 other people so they could do their job, so that the producer and whomever else, the creative director, and AE didn't have to stay up all night long, sort of, going through this craziness to do something that one person could do very well if given the ability and the chance to do so, and then kind of understand it and really realize that it is a full-time job for somebody to do. And not only that, it is a team of people. I often bring in somebody to assist me. And so it's interesting that it didn't even used to be a thing. And now we all know that it is. And I'm thankful for that.
I'm thankful for it too, believe me, because you're right. It's, usually a lot of times when I stage manage, it's, oh, here's the documents. And I'm like, ho, here's all of our content. I'm like, I'm running a show. I have to call a show. And that in itself is its own monster, and then you've got the graphics people who are trying to organize things, but the missing link is really the content producer. And I think it's just, it's great.
Yeah, it's a hub of a wheel.
Yeah.
And a lot of I know a lot of graphics designers and stage managers and the shows that, whether they're not considered to be large enough or have that need per se, I will hear that it's very difficult for the designers and the stage managers. So it may not even be as big of a show, but because a content producer wouldn't be there hired, they then have to take that on. The designers are managing the files, teleprompter, stage manager just sort of gets what they get. And it's an interesting thing to not have, considering when you have that hub of the wheel, it makes the wheel turn. And when you don't, I think it's a lot more clunky. And this isn't about patting myself on the back. This is just about completing the whole picture of what makes everything go and how that happens.
Yeah. And I think, I've worked with designers before, and designers have their own pressures. A lot of times they're internal, so they really can't pressure their higher ups to hand over the goods, But I think if there's someone there who has a list, which I'm sure you have, a list of deadlines and a list of assets, and you say, here's what we need at this point in time in order to execute that, to me, that makes sense and it is helpful. But
definitely. Yeah, I'm a list person,
and a
grid person, and a checkoff person
I
for
bet.
sure.
Hey, let me ask you this. I ask people this question a lot. Google Docs, is it good for our industry here, or is it challenging?
That's a really good question, and I would say it's both. I think with anything, an application or a program is really only as good as sort of the discussion around how the tool is going to be used, because a lot of times it's just like, oh, it's up on Google Docs and nobody's told anybody about it, and people's notifications aren't set to receive it. So no protocol has been set about how to use it. And then it becomes worse. Now you have all these tabs and documents and grids that supposedly all the information is there, but it's way too much and nobody knows where to get it. So you have to establish how the team is going to use that program, and everybody has to agree. And I think that's where we get into trouble with technology, is that it's an incredible tool, all of it, all the aspects of it, but we can't just forego the human interaction and that setting and establishing of how we're going to use them. So I would say it's been great when we all say, okay, here's the show flow, whether it's in the show flow app or Google Docs, or, here's where we're going to capture the data, and here are the people that are going to update it, and we're getting these notifications. And you know what? Let's still meet about it once a week. Let's talk on the phone, because it does not run by itself. You don't just throw spaghetti on a wall and then at the end, have a dinner. You have to, you have to talk about it in whatever, whatever program you're using. So I think it's a really useful tool. Personally for me, when I'm content managing, I generally do not put my grids in Google Docs because I want sole ownership, but it's also, I don't have any hard and fast rules in that whatever team I'm on, if it works better that we do it that way, I will do it that way, because I don't want to be, setting such rules for myself that I don't now fit in with the team. But I will raise my voice and, let everybody know my opinion about it, so that we can get a solid footing going forward with what everybody agrees on. But I think, again, whatever way the team is going to go, I think it's really important to establish how it's going to go, and then you're set up for success whether you use Google Docs or not. So that's what I would say to that.
I agree that it is a great collaboration tool. I think, and it's funny because you and I are both in a position where we are kind of I always say I'm at the end of the snowplow. The snowplow runs down the street, and at the end, that's where I'm standing.
Yes, exactly.
So I and you, and I'm being a stage manager and calling a show, I need to have a definitive end to the collaboration, because you can't continue to evolve the show during a show. I mean, it happens, but there has to be a definitive end so that I can then do my job and execute. So I love Google Docs in that it allows everybody to collaborate. But there comes a point where you need to say, okay, that's it. Now we're doing it.
No, you're absolutely right. And I mean, I've worked on Google shows where they're using, we're using their, I'm forgetting the name of the programs, but when you,
I've heard about them, and they're like live documents that they're putting up.
Yeah.
Oh my God, what a heart attack.
It's because you need to be linear at a certain point. I mean, the collaboration is great in pre-production, but then you have to be linear, and then, you as a stage manager at the end of the line, and it's like you have to have it clean, clear, and knowing what is and what isn't, and there's no gray area at that point.
Right.
I look at myself as the stopgap to you, and the stopgap to the content team backstage, and there has to be a settling. And so again, I think you used it in pre-pro and sort of segueing over, which can be difficult because it's hard for people to kind of change process. But that's part of my role is that. I mean, when you're talking about working on Google shows, you obviously have to.
Right.
We kind of have to do it their way, but it's difficult to say the least. You cannot have things just continually be fluid while you're in show. That just cannot happen.
So despite popular belief.
Right. Everything, it's got its place for sure.
Everything must actually happen. Oh, that's funny. What do you think is the single most important attribute of a content manager?
I would say being present and paying attention. And you really, there's so much information that you're taking on. that you have to be focused. And so if you're distracted or can't do that, you will not be able to know what's what. I think there's a lot of things I could say that are really important, but I say the basis starts with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tend to agree. There's a lot of people who are not present and they're not paying attention. So I think being the content manager, you definitely have to have that as an attribute.
Well, I think when you, just to add a little to that, what happens is when you are present and staying with it, then you start to memorize things. It starts to become, you're gaining sort of the language of the show, and so that you're very you can be very fluid. And so if you're not there and if you're not paying attention, it's much more difficult. And there's just the onslaught. It gets bigger as you get closer to show, and clearly, version control is right there. But before you can even manage version control, you have to absolutely manage yourself and be, really free of distractions, and give sort of that part of yourself, freely to what you're doing. And I mean, I try to do that in all aspects of my life, and as best as I can. But I would say that's where I'm coming from a content management perspective.
And if you could wave a magic wand and suddenly all event producers and clients could hear your advice, what's the one thing you would tell them as it relates to the content in their shows?
File naming.
That's so funny. Go ahead. Tell me about that.
Well, I think if you don't know what's what, you have confusion at the very essential level. And so you have people just sending things, the same file name over and over on different days. And it's not that you can't check a date on Dropbox or Box and see, oh, Fred Smith posted that same thing, and now it's on, you can see the date. But I think that we are losing something with the posting on sharing sites. You still have to take responsibility for whatever it is you just posted. Name it. Just be literal. This is Michelle Newbon's poem, looking ahead _ date, and put it up there. Give it clarity so that everybody can have a chance at knowing what that is. And it shouldn't be sort of like, well, the content manager will figure it out, because then that's wasting time. And then the more time I have to spend figuring things out, then the less time that goes to sort of progressing things forward. So I think that, I understand it, that everybody is pressed and rushed. And so things just get fired off. But first and foremost, if we're to even, the basis of content itself is clarity. And so the more clarity we can have on what it is we're doing, what it is we're sharing, what it is we want to do, the greater success we're going to have all the way through. So it starts with file naming.
I could not agree with you more. It's like, if I could agree 250%, I would do that. I actually have a graphics friend, who just started his own company, and his company name is Final Version 7. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Oh, right. That's great. And never put final in the file name. That'd be the other thing I'd say. It's a subcategory, because it's never final. Don't ever do that.
It's true. It's so funny. It's and I think, we're in the business, and I think it's interesting. We have this perspective. I think a lot of people who present don't think about the fact. I mean, they know there's other people presenting. Maybe there's, 50, 100 other people presenting, but they don't, we always give them the naming protocol. Put your name in the title, put your name in the file, or, even in emails that come back and forth. It's, put your name in it, so at least we know who this is coming from. And
I agree. It's really interesting to be, I feel like it's a lack of awareness outside of yourself.
Yes.
Because as a presenter, I mean, the number one thing is to know your audience, right? And so you have to know that. And so it goes back all the way to the file naming, because it's like, what is it? And then where is it going? And who are you speaking to? And so, I find it interesting when there's a disconnect that way, where it's just, I know people have just different ways they work. And so it's not like some,
No, I don't think anybody does it on purpose. I think it's just, and this is part of like the reason I wanted to kind of do a podcast, because, it's not, there's industry people hopefully that are listening, but also there's people who, run events and they go, wow, I never even thought that, that's important. Well, it is, especially when, like you say, the CEO comes out and it's the wrong version. We've got version 3 and this is version, 8 that we're on.
Well, and it's really interesting too, because I feel, when I'm on a show, I know for certain that I have the latest, what happens. And I know that because I'm paying attention. It's not some cockiness. It's just, I know that what's been handed over. However, what I've seen in the whole line about that heads are going to roll actually came from a rehearsal that I was in. That was a direct quote from a C-suite executive that did say that's the wrong version. And I knew it was not. But what happened is oftentimes on the client side, there's a whole kind of kerfluffle going on where they don't have it straight. So whatever they've handed to us is not the current version. But once it comes to our side, I'm absolutely certain that we have what has been given. Now, if they can't get the correct version to us, that's another thing. And then we have to manage that.
Right.
And that happens a fair amount of the time because there's understandably, they have a lot to deal with and a lot of people will have to look at it. And even if they're collaborating, it does not matter. It does not matter if it's a single document or a collaborative application. It's still there can be a lack of management on that side, even when there's one point, which I always like is to have that portal on either side. It comes through one person on the client side and it comes through me on our side. But that can happen.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And so I think when that comes out, that's the wrong version. I mean, that's the go-to fear aspect. Somebody's on stage, they see some words in prompter in the DSMs that they don't remember. They're sure they changed. And that I've been there many, many times. And it's really about calming the situation down and saying, and really just neutralizing it, knowing, taking somebody backstage if we need to and figuring it out. But generally 9 times out of 10, we have the right version. And so that's something, because people are bringing that stress and that tension that they're putting themselves out there. They have put a lot into it and now they've got to be in front of people, and say what they're going to say. And it's a quick response to say that's the wrong version.
And yet, all this stuff that happens and all the stress on site, and we all still love the industry. And
love it. Love it.
And you have another poem that actually talks about that.
I do.
How cool is that?
Well, yeah, thank you. This one is, it comes from sort of being in the space we're in now, and I wrote it, and I'll go ahead and read it. It's called Flying High. I have no regrets about wondering if I appreciated enough what's gone over the cliff. I always knew how special it was to be part of it all, the production team buzz. Had we'd come together and put on a show, we'd build that car as we drove down the road. The stress of it all has always been rife, but I never imagined not wanting this life. The rewards run deep because of us all, heeding the siren and answering the call. The friendships we've made are like family indeed, the alchemy on sight, forging our creed. To sit here now, knowing what will not be, is to experience grief and melancholy. We all understand that virtual is the way, but we'll never forget what we had in the day. You can't get there from here without being together. We all know that we are birds of a feather.
I love that. I love that. I think it's it's extremely heartfelt, and I think anybody who's in this industry feels exactly the same way. You really, are hitting the mark.
Thank you, Terry.
Yeah. Where do you think
I am?
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, I was going to say, where do you think the industry is going to go from here?
I think that I do think it's going to be a hybrid of the way it used to be, and now with these new protocols, we're going to Well, I also think it's going to be a hybrid with virtual. And I have read some scenarios where we're going to have live as a portion of the event, and then certain people will be able to come to the live event, and others will just participate virtually. So it will be more of a democratized situation. If that's actually not quite the right word. It's going to be where you just have some going to the event and some not, and it's
Yeah.
going to create a hierarchy. That's the word I'm looking for.
Mhm.
As far as how we are on site, the protocols of social distancing, the masks and the sanitizing, the fever checks and that kind of thing. I think that it's all going to be there, and it's going to add these layers of, really, I think it's cumbersome. And
Yeah.
so we already have enough on our plates. It's already a huge thing to do what we do, each individual. I mean, from, the number of hours we put in each day, what we're doing, and then to add that on is a serious weight. And I think that's going to be difficult. And we will not have, what we've lost is that the way it was when we just didn't have that, when we didn't think about that, when you didn't have to wonder, should I shake your hand or not? Can I hug you or
Mhm.
not? Can
Mhm.
we be close or not? Because all of the being together is what we all know is the magic. And so if you have to separate yourselves and be awkward with it and all the other protocols, it adds that level. But that said, I still can't wait to go back. And there's just still nothing like it. And so I think that's, in thinking about what I just wrote, I always knew and have always felt this is such a privilege to be invited to these shows and to be continually invited to be on teams to produce these amazing events. I just kind of pinch myself, even in the most stressful times, even in the times I've been brought close to tears. It does not matter. It's like, this is where I want to be. So I think that even with all that, even with where we're headed and what the time frame is, I mean, I did just see this morning that CES is going to be putting on their live event in 2021 in January. That is heartening to know that they are putting a stake in the sand. Um, I do think that it, I'm glad to know that. I was really thinking and understanding that it was probably going to be potentially next summer before we had live events back, but that's kind of what I think. We're never going to have what it was. So there is a mourning of that, kind of like, I
Mhm.
want to say free and easy, although it was never free and never easy, but it won't be like it was that in that way. It's going to have these other aspects that are going to make it more self-conscious in a way. And at some point that'll become normal. I think a few years down the road.
Yeah.
But a certain it's a paradigm shift. We can't go back from this. And I think the full recognition of that is important, because it's about, I don't know, I've gone through all the stages of grief, sort of like denial and
Uh-huh.
anger and acceptance, and at each different point, and they kind of all revolve. I don't want this, no, I want it the way it was. Well, it isn't anymore, and that's life. So just grow up. I mean, I have all sorts of
Mhm.
conversations in my head, but
Mhm.
I do think it'll come back, and it is going to be different.
Yeah, it's funny, you talk about kind of handshaking and giving people hugs, because I'm kind of that way too. And I remember it was weird, the last show I did was in New York, and it was right before all this started. It was like mid-March 10th or something like that. And even then, people were weird about hugging, but not really. Like, everybody was like, okay, everything's still cool. And that just changed in like 2 days, like in a week. Nobody, well, first of all, nobody was working, so you couldn't really hug anybody, but the whole mindset just kind of changed, and it was just kind of weird.
It absolutely did. And my last show was in San Francisco the last week in February. I was on site for 10 days on site while San Francisco went into a state of emergency. And we were, it's an internet security conference called RSA,
Mm-hmm.
40,000
Oh
people.
my God.
And the beginning of that, we sort of had inklings, like Facebook had canceled their conference, which was
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks after ours at the Moscone Center, which is where we had our conference.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like, what? Wait, what do they know? And
Mm.
so we were on site, and day 1, day 2, and 3, and we had 4 days of shows on that one. But when in pre-production, early on, it didn't seem like anything was different. By day 5, people were not shaking hands, and everybody was visibly wondering, what's going on. Then the state of emergency was declared. We're still walking from our hotel of the Moscone in a sea of people to a conference with, like I said, 40,000 people. And then coming, done with work March 1st, and basically the gauntlet came down. But it was really eerie to kind of have it change right before our eyes. And interestingly, too, our theme on that conference was the human element, #human element. And at a security conference, which was just the parallels there with the fact that there's the, viruses, high, that we're talking about in technology. And then in parallel, this whole thing happening, running through the population, and the fact that as internet conference had the human element as its theme, and really talking about the importance of people, and that people make this all happen, and what is behind the technology always is the people. And so it was extremely, poignant, and without even realizing it at the time, like the power and poignancy of that. And so as I left that conference knowing the world was changing, it was just crazy. Like it was written kind of in a way to let us know the importance of that.
That's like bizarre and scary kind of.
Yeah, like ominous.
Yeah, exactly. You have one more poem for us, and it's kind of forward looking. So I kind of want you to, if you would, I would love for you to read that, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay, sure thing. This one is called Looking Ahead. Stopped in time and standing still, seeking the view that's over the hill. It's not written and we don't know what's ahead and how to go. The show must go on has always been the way. We won't go down, we will have our day. We've been working since this whole thing to carve a new path and make it sing. It's hard to see through the clouds right now, but I'll be damned if we can't figure out how. Suffice to say we're a hardy lot, we don't give up, and we give all we've got. It's a big FU to what's gone down, but we'll ride that emotion to bring it around. And I guarantee and pinky swear that the show will go on. That's a truth and a dare.
I love your last line. That's a truth and a dare. That's that is just too cool. Right on. It's we're all going to get there together, and I really appreciate your poems, because it's really what brought the two of us together. I thought that was cool. Like I met you on LinkedIn. I kind of stalked you. I'm stalking people these days.
I love that. I know. That's so cool.
But yeah, I saw your poem, and I did. It resonated with me. I think a lot of people. You got some really great reactions on that poem, and I wanted to bring you on the show and talk to you because not only that, but I think what you do is just so important to any show. So I wanted to do that. And I'm going to put all your poems in the show notes so that people can reread them and relate to them, because I know they will. And if people want to get in touch with you, Michelle, how do we do that?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, Michelle Newbon, and my email is on there as well. I have it's michelle@mnewbon.com. You can get a hold of me. My cell as well, 530-263-4153. And I think that's it.
All right, cool. I'll put that all in the show notes too. Hey, if you're looking for somebody to keep your show on track, Michelle can help you out. And I appreciate you taking the time. And I look forward to the time when we can actually see each other and work together, hopefully.
Me too. Thank you, Terry.
Well, that's a wrap for this show. Hey, you can show us some love by subscribing to the show wherever you're listening to us. Subscribing is caring. You can also find us at eventyak.com. The opinions expressed on Event Yak are the opinions of our individual guests and not necessarily the organizations to which they're affiliated. Event Yak is a production of Moonfish Production Limited. Thank you for listening. Be kind, be safe, and stand by to stand by.